Hey world, this is Justin, and you are tuned to Anywhere the Needle Drops. Welcome to the show, folks. Welcome. Today we have our chat with Pete Droge. Pete Droge, how are you all doing out there, folks? What's going on? Here in the Midwest, we're winding down the summer season. We've still got some weeks left, but you can already feel the cool in the air. And the kids are back in school. The work I do on campus at the local university, the faculty and the students are all back. It's definitely feeling like a shift in the seasons in many, many ways. And, I hope you're taking advantage of, the time we still have left in the summer. Maybe get yourself to a beach or to some kind of sunshiny, warm weather activity. Get out there in the sun, get that sunshine on you, get your feet in the grass, in the dirt, all that stuff. Get some nature on you. It's good for you. We need it. As we always discuss on this show, things are tough in the world right now. We got a lot of challenges, got some fights we have to fight, but we can't do it if we're not taking care of ourselves. And I do very much believe that getting out into nature is a huge part of that. And I also, before we get to today's episode, I just want to remind you of the special episode we put out just this past week on Friday of last week, my chat with Dina Woods. It was, sort of a surprise release for her, and then so a quick turnaround with that episode. We wanted to get that out right away for you because it really is just a wonderful episode, all about the healing power of creativity and play and, coping through struggles and finding the magic in the world. You really do need to listen to that episode. I don't know that there's one I'm prouder of. It makes me emotional when I hear it, and I got a little emotional on it, and it's a wonderful episode. Please check out last week's episode with Dina Woods. But today, let's talk about today's episode, Pete Droge. So listen, Pete Droge, if you are of my generation, you probably first encountered Pete in the 90s, the alternative era. Particularly for me, it was the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack, the soundtrack for the movie Dumb and Dumber, which oddly enough, just before I heard from Pete about coming on the show, I ran into that CD, the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack, at a record store I was writing a story about, and man, I hadn't thought about that album in forever, and there it was. And then I get an email from Pete's team about coming on the show to talk about this new album. It's in the air, folks. It's in the air. And, since that time, Pete has had a wonderful career in music, making many, many albums and, doing some work in film scoring and other realms. And he's here today to talk to us about his album that just came out this past week, Fade Away Blue. And it's wonderful. Really check it out. It's a great album. You can get it wherever you do your streaming thing. And of course, check out the store over at Pete's website, PeteDroge.com. I don't know if they're still available, but they had some cool vinyl and some other physical options for you there. But it's a great album, a great chat with Pete. Thank you, Pete, for taking the time to come on the show. Before we get to the interview, let's take you to the album, get you a little taste of what's on that record. You're going to hear the opening track, You Called Me Kid, and then my chat with Pete Droge is after. Take care. Here's to life.
1, 2, 3, 4. My world was inside out. No idea what I was about. But then you saw me just as I was, a child in a daydream, trying to catch your slipstream. You called me kid, and I can't thank you enough for what you did. You called me kid. Never in this life could anybody find a more genuine this picture of us on the beach, holding my hand and up I reach. We're running fast away from a wave and maybe trying to chase us, but we got smiles on our faces. You called me kid, and I can't thank you enough for what you did. You called me kid, never in this life could anybody find a more generous or precious gift to give. Well, in my mind, you got my headphones on, watching you move to my song. Close your eyes and smile and say, kid, this is a good one. Yeah, it's a good one. You called me kid, and I can't thank you enough for what you did. You called me kid, never in this life could anybody find a more generous or precious gift to give. Knock yourself out, kid. Knock yourself out. Knock yourself out, kid. Knock yourself out. Knock yourself out, kid. Knock yourself out. Knock yourself out, kid. Knock yourself out.
Pete Droge, welcome to Anywhere the Needle Drops. Appreciate you taking the time to get on here. I know we had to juggle schedules a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but I'm glad we were able to get this going. So.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we'll definitely, you've got the new release coming out, or actually this episode will come out just after the new album's out. So we'll definitely get into that. But before we do that, especially for a first-time guest on the show, we do like to do a little deep dive into the background, that sort of a thing. So obviously you've been in the music business for quite a long time. I mean, we're talking over 30 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So
how'd that happen?
Hey, listen, I mean, it was funny because there's a new record shop in a little town nearby here. This is an area where it's made up largely of a lot of small towns kind of together as opposed to one big town. And so I was checking out this new record shop, writing a piece on it for the local newspaper, and I'm digging through they have a CD section, and I'm digging through the CDs, and I pull out that Dumb and Dumber soundtrack, which I honestly haven't thought about in years, but I may have even had that on cassette tape back in the day.
Nice.
And it was a day or two later that I get the email from your team saying, "Hey,
oh wow."
Yeah, so it was in the air. So
I love a good coincidence like that.
I know, right? So I still have to get back to that record shop and buy that CD now. I feel like I need to have that in my collection. So
yeah, man.
Yeah. So, so let's go back a little bit. Obviously, that's going back into the '90s and such. But even before the music career, I mean. Let's talk about music as a kid or as you were growing up. I mean, where do your influences come from? What were your family playing around the house, that kind of a thing?
There was a lot of music in the house. I was blessed that my dad had a really cool record collection. So I got exposed to Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel and a lot of the huge blockbuster records of the 70s. So we had Elton John playing in the house, James Taylor, lots of stuff like that. I was obsessed as a grade school kid with Kiss.
All right.
That was it for me. And it's funny, I did an interview recently with another guy about my age, and he's like, yeah, that's kind of like all of us this age, we got bit by the Kiss bug, and, I had the lunchbox and the posters and the belt buckle and all that, joined the Kiss Army.
I mean, how do you not with the costumes and just,
Exactly.
the unabashed rock and roll of it all? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first moment that I heard Kiss. It was on Christmas. I must have been maybe second grade. And my cousin bought my dad, his uncle, Kiss Rock and Roll All Over for Christmas, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice, to give your uncle. And we had, like I said, a very musical family. And so there were a bunch of records that were exchanged over Christmas, and they were all stacked up on the turntable. If you remember the turntables, we could put multiple records on
yeah.
the top, and then they dropped down one at a time. And I remember there was a Captain and Tennille record there, and we listened to that. And then when the Kiss record dropped and the needle dropped on that, I was like a scene out of Beavis and Butthead. I was like, I was like, I totally loved it. And I took piano lessons in grade school. Before that, when I was really young, I played ukulele. My mom had a couple ukuleles around the house.
Okay.
Making up little songs when I was like 4. My mom was an elementary school music teacher. So I actually had her as my 5th grade music teacher, and she gave me special treatment in the choir where I got to play the crash cymbals. She figured, okay, if you have to put up with your mom being the teacher, we'll give you a little special treatment and let you
Have
do
a little
that.
fun, yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. And I was involved in children's theater, starting from about 4th grade through high school. So that's when I kind of got my first taste of, performing and singing in front of an audience. Junior high school, I gravitated from the piano to the guitar. Got really pretty dorked out about the guitar at that time. And by, as far as the influences at that time, I got out of the Kiss thing and started, digging into my dad's old records. So I started getting into the Dylan and the Simon and Garfunkel stuff. Also went deep into the hard rock, classic stuff. Like I was a huge AC/DC fan.
Sure, yeah.
Spent so many hours playing along with AC/DC records. Big Rolling Stones fan, which then led me to the blues. So around the time I was about 15 or 16, I learned that the Stones had gotten their name from a Muddy Waters song. And I went into one of the record stores in Seattle, and they had like the discount cassette bin. And there was a tape that said Muddy Waters, and I brought it home. And I remember putting that tape in, and this was the really, really early stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the early Muddy Waters. It's really raw.
Oh, no.
And I put it on, and I was like a dog who kind of cocks its head to the side, like, what is this? Like, I didn't understand it at all. It felt like it was music that was like coming from another planet or something. It was like nothing I'd ever heard. And I can't say at first that I actually liked it, but I was intrigued enough that I had to hear it again, like immediately. And then I was bit by the bug and loved it. And then I discovered like, B.B. King and a lot of other blues music. And, I joined my first band in high school, which was called March of Crimes. And that was, I've said many times before, March of Crimes is officially a footnote in rock history, in that 2 members of that band went on to become Rock and Roll Hall of Famers.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So one was Ben Shepherd from Soundgarden.
Yeah.
We overlapped in the band for a minute. I was in the first incarnation, and then he joined. I quit shortly after he joined because it wasn't really my vibe. And then after I had left, Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam
Nice.
Was sort of in the band for a minute. As he tells it in an interview that I saw a while back, he said, well, I did a couple rehearsals, and then the band was like, yeah, no thanks. And John Evison, who was the singer under the name Monkey Seeker, was his punk rock name. John recently said, we were the band that was, so brilliant that we kicked Stone Gossard out of our band.
That's always a great, to be able to lay claim to that. It's always good,
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, that was my first band. Then I played guitar again. Yeah. Not singing in that band, but just playing guitar. My second band was called 25th Hour. And we played all of one show. Which was kind of a cool gig. We opened for a really legendary punk rock band in Seattle called The Accused.
Okay.
And then the other band on the bill was Malfunction. So speaking of Stone Gossard, Andy Wood from Mother Love Bone, Stone's band before Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Andy Wood was the singer of Malfunction. And
So, I mean, is that all just a matter of at that point, especially just that was kind of the scene? Because there's a lot of that that goes around where I'm in this neck of the woods too, the South Bend music scene, where you've got members that are kind of shifting in and out of bands pretty regularly, and then one kind of takes off a little bit, that sort of a thing. So, what was? I mean, obviously we know what the Seattle scene became, but was that
yeah,
still in the early days of it?
yeah, this would have been, I was in my freshman year of high school when I was in March of Crime. So that would have been like 83.
Okay, all
And
right.
then the gig that I did with Malfunction with my band 25th Hour, that was the end, like December of 84. So this was early days. There was not even a whiff of sort of the big time stuff that we would experience later. I did start to feel the significance of Seattle music scene in the late 80s. My band, so after that, I played around solo and played like coffee shops and did some stuff like that. And then I had a band called Ramadillo, and that was the group that I did a lot of gigging with around Seattle in the I guess it would have been around 89, 90 into 91, something like that. And we went down to Austin because we weren't really fitting into the Seattle scene at all. Like we were alt country before the term even existed. So we were like, in those days, they would call it roots rock.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
And we kind of, felt a little bit against the grain in Seattle. And so we went down to Austin, Texas to see if maybe that would be a spot for us. And when I was down there, we met people who were like, "Oh my God, you're from Seattle. Do you know Soundgarden?" Or, like there was like, it was interesting to see that, some of the bands, were on the map down there. And so that's when I first started to get a whiff that, things were happening. And then it's funny, I just put a comment on Facebook yesterday because the aforementioned John Evison, who has a podcast, great podcast called A Fresh Face in Hell. I was on there a couple of weeks ago, and then he just interviewed Chad Channing, who was the drummer that Dave Grohl replaced in a band you might be familiar with called Nirvana.
Yeah.
And I
May have
remember,
heard a thing or two.
yeah, so I remember kind of, that stuff kind of picking up a little bit of steam. And I bumped into Chad under the viaduct in Seattle, right off the ferry boat from where we both, used to live on Bainbridge Island. And he was like, "Yeah, I've got this band, we've got a single coming out on Sub Pop." And Sub Pop was just starting at that time. I was like, "Wow, that's so cool. You got a record." And I said, what's the band called? And he says, Nirvana. And I thought to myself, like, what a terrible name. So it shows what I know.
You know what? I have a similar experience, different genre, but I caught, being here in Michigan, I remember catching a fairly early show of Eminem actually, and walking away
Mhm.
from it being like, that guy's not gonna go anywhere, So we all have our moments, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, but that's all right. It's cool to have been in that. So
Totally. Yeah. So it
so
was interesting, watching the Seattle scene kind of pick up steam and gather a momentum. You definitely saw it kind of turn, obviously, when Nevermind and 10 came out. And,
sure.
but it was interesting. What I don't think a lot of people, I think, Nirvana really gets all the credit for like breaking the Seattle scene. But if you go back and look, it was actually Alice in Chains that made the first really big splash on the national scene with Man in the Box.
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean, that's kind of my experience too. We grew up around here. I mean, we have a lot of country stations and a lot of, like classic rock stations. Though I guess what we're talking about now qualifies as classic rock. But back in
Yeah,
the
right.
day, when I was growing up in the 90s, we were listening to a lot of Q101 out of Chicago. And I remember a lot of other bands before we got to the Nirvana thing, and Alice in Chains definitely being one of those first ones
Yeah,
for me that really hit.
yeah, yeah. I think that was like kind of the first like MTV video song, And I remember when there was, I think it was a cover story on Rolling Stone about Seattle, you know, I think the Posies were actually the big picture on the page. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were kind of putting their money down on them because they were, maybe a bit more, you would have guessed that they had a more of a commercial kind of mainstream kind of vibe. But yeah, it was pretty fascinating to be around that time and to witness all of that. blow up and just get so huge. And, the whole sort of timbre of the Seattle community shifted a good bit at that time. After those bands broke, you started to see, bands that were maybe hair metal a year ago suddenly had, flannel shirts tied around their waist.
Yeah.
The classic, Greyhound bus with Hollywood sign on the front, I'm going to go be a star. It's like suddenly that was changed to Seattle, and you had a lot of people coming into the city kind of looking to get in on that action. And you did feel kind of the intention change a little bit, to where certainly in the 80s, when I kind of first started out, it was a very innocent scene. I think, people have talked about this a lot. There wasn't really a business to speak of in Seattle. We were way off the beaten path, up in the northwest corner. And that started to change after all that success, where you had, you'd overhear, people in a coffee shop like, yeah, man, we got major label interest. And, so-and-so from such and such label came out to see us or whatever. It's like it really suddenly was, a different kind of sense.
Yeah, we actually talk about that quite a bit here. The guy that does sound on this show, Paul, we're both doing a lot of work, really trying to foster this local music scene that we have here, because there's an incredible amount of talent. And as much as I love going to Chicago to catch a show, catching some of the bigger names, that kind of a thing, there's really, you can't have a weekend without having to miss a great show because there were two other great shows or whatever, so it's a great scene here, and we're trying to do the thing to foster it. But also we always have that in the back of our minds, like, okay, well, when people finally catch on to what's going on here, how do we keep that purity?
Yeah.
How do we keep that? Because then, the sort of commercialized interest can come in, and if you're not careful, change it to something different,
Yeah, totally.
So, okay, so as you're, doing this exploration of music, as you're growing up, and you're starting to play, obviously you've got a mom who teaches music, so I have to imagine there's some pride there, and you're digging through your dad's vinyl, so that's all good. But then you're also, taking your own path, which is what you're supposed to do. How are they feeling about this? Are they, is there encouragement? Is there pushback? Is there both?
There was no pushback. I was very blessed that my parents were always supportive. They did encourage me to go to college after high school, and especially my grandmother, who was also a teacher. It was really important to her that I go to college. So I went to a school called Cornish College of the Arts, straight out of high school, and studied jazz guitar.
Oh, nice.
And I spent a year there. I think it served me reasonably well. I was able to, learn theory, beyond what I'd learned in piano lessons and guitar lessons in junior high school. And then I played in the jazz band in high school. So I had a, decent understanding of music theory kind of going into that school, but it definitely, expanded that. But then it got way beyond what I would ever need. This was like heavy duty jazz theory of like the diatonic scale for the harmonic minor scale. It's like, I'm never going to need those weird chords. You know what I mean? I don't need to know. I learned all about modes and, the Dorian mode and the Mixolydian mode. Like, that's kind of all I need, maybe the Phrygian mode could come in handy, like working on a film score or something. But I got to the point where, I was learning all this complex theory, and then I would go home and write a song with GCD.
Yeah.
And play pentatonic blues scales, So, that kind of ran its course. I went a year at a community college in Seattle, and then I went down to a school called Evergreen, which is a really progressive kind of hippie school in Olympia. And actually, Olympia had a pretty cool music scene at that time that I completely missed out on. I was back and forth to Seattle all the time. And at that time, when I was going to Evergreen, speaking of Stone Gossard, the aforementioned Stone Gossard, during the Mother Love Bone time, secured me a demo deal with Polygram Records.
Nice.
Through his A&R guy. And so I was back and forth recording that demo and playing shows, and almost flunked out of Evergreen. And so that was sort of the crossroad for me of kind of like, okay, I could see that both my pursuit of music and my school were suffering. The school was suffering much more than the pursuit of music. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna skip the school thing. And with the demo deal, it didn't come to fruition. It didn't lead to a deal, but it was enough of an encouragement, like, okay, maybe this could happen.
Sure,
And
yeah.
so that was kind of like the moment where I was like, okay, I'm going all in into the music and, you know,
Well, and
hunker down and
sometimes, those are those things too that, and it's even if that path doesn't fully work out, it puts you into spaces with other people and you start to connect, and for lack of a better term, network, but like you meet like-minded people and
yeah.
that is almost as important as the rest of it. It seems like.
Yeah. I mean, fast forward, the other guitar player in Pearl Jam ended up financing a demo for me. And, it was that friendship that, ultimately gave me my break in show business because that's how I got my deal.
Yeah.
He financed my demo and played a little guitar on it, passed it along to his manager, Kelly Curtis, who then partnered with Krisha Ojiro, and they took me on for management. And then we shopped that around and got label interest. And then it was actually through Mike passing the demo along to his producer on the Versus record at the time, Brendan O'Brien. And Brendan had just acquired signing power at American Records, which was Rick Rubin's label.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my deal. So yeah, I mean, it's like, and the way that Mike discovered my music, he tells the story of I was like at a party. I used to take my guitar with me like everywhere. And I guess I was in the corner of the living room of some party playing Sway by the Rolling Stones. And Mike was like, "Who's that?" And he dug my music. And, so if I hadn't gone to that party that night, maybe it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
So
As you're, working through that and you're making this decision about school and all of that, is there ever a moment where you're having, kind of those fears about, making a living or any of that? Or was that at a time of your life where, it was a little more like just kind of, we had that reckless time where we just kind of go for things, what was that like for you?
I think it was more reckless, go for it mentality. I had a job at a pizza restaurant. In fact, McCready and I worked together at one of the pizza restaurants that I worked at. Yeah, so I was just working, slinging pie and playing a lot of club gigs and cutting my teeth live. And yeah, I can't even really say that I ever gave it any thought of like, well, what am I going to do if the music thing doesn't work out? In fact, I remember in the Tom Petty documentary, he was saying, somebody was like, well, what are you going to fall back on? And I think his answer was something like, well, we're not falling back. We're going forward.
Yep. Yep.
And so, yeah, I think it was that sort of, blissful ignorance of youth of just like, we're doing it. And, I did have the benefit of being in Seattle in the early 90s and seeing it really work out for people. It was also a time when there were more opportunities, sort of, how do I put it? You didn't have to go as far up the ladder in order to make a living. The business was thriving enough that, there were bands that could be on, a good indie label and could, make enough of a splash to get out on the road and make a living.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot harder now. I mean, it's easier in some ways, the barrier of entry to actually get a record out and have people hear your music. That's obviously easier. But certainly with the economics of streaming and, it's so much more expensive to tour now than it was then.
Yeah.
I think it's harder. There were more opportunities to kind of have a modest career and maybe make, a lower middle class living and be able to, pay your rent. The cost of living was so much more manageable back then.
Sure.
Seattle definitely, got more expensive sooner than other spots. But, you could move to a town like Austin, look at the movie Slacker. It's like all these people could kind of have cheap rent and do their music and their art and kind of float around. And so in those days, it was a lot easier to fathom that, and I think, I've met younger people, even years ago who like the idea of making a living in music, like never crossed their mind, even though they were very serious about making music. It's like, it didn't even feel like an option that would be their job, so.
Yeah, I speak to artists of all levels on this show. We've had some bigger names. And then we've had, I have people on here from the local scene that are, they still have, their day jobs and are just churning out music on the side. And the different stories of how that all comes together is pretty fascinating. And yeah, it's a different time. In some ways, I think. Like you said, it is a lot harder. There are other ways it can be a little easier. I know an artist in particular, Abby Thomas, who she is, the queen of kind of the hustle. I mean, she's incredibly talented, when she plays, but then she's figured out that formula of the business side of it. And I think that's a benefit to some of these smaller scenes as opposed to the
Yeah.
city scenes. But yeah, I mean, you've seen it. I mean, you saw the internet rise up. I mean, how did you navigate that over the course of your career, all those shifts and changes?
It's been interesting. I came up, my first album came out in 94. Like I said, it was on American Recordings, which was part of Warner Brothers. So, it was a major label, but it was like a smaller boutique label within the majors. So it was kind of the best of both worlds, where it was a very artist friendly label, with a small staff, but we had all the, major distribution and all of that. So I definitely, came up through that major label system. They, being a smaller label, they didn't spray the money hose on me like they would have, an act that they were trying to break on, like Atlantic or Columbia. But, was definitely the beneficiary of major label money, to where we had tour support, like they wrote a check every week for us to be on the road. We got to make videos, all of that kind of stuff. And, back then video budgets were huge. On my first album, we made cheap videos by their standards. But we did all that stuff. And in those days, it was all about radio and MTV. That was totally the focus.
Yeah.
And so I did 3 records in the 90s on majors, 2 for American and then 1 for Epic. Brendan O'Brien, who signed me over at Epic, signed me at American, moved from American to Epic and started his own label there called 57 Records. And so then I got a taste of kind of being on a bigger, Sony corporate kind of label. And then, when you talk about the transition, right around the turn of the century, that's when Napster entered the picture. And I was dropped in 99 from the deal with Epic. And that was a real pivotal time. A lot was changing. So by the time I put out a record with Matthew Sweet and Sean Mullins, we did a harmony band called The Thorns. We signed with Aware, which was a subsidiary of Columbia, in early of 2002. And boy, things had changed a lot in that time. Suddenly, the big labels were pinching pennies, which they just were not doing that at all in the 90s. And I, at the very same time that the Thorns record came out, put out my first indie release as a solo artist through a thing called United Musicians, which was maybe an idea that was maybe ahead of its time. This was founded by Amy Mann and Michael Penn, and their manager, who I shared management with them, a guy named Michael Hausman. And the idea with United Musicians was an artist-owned label collective. So you would have your own label, but you would go through United Musicians and then have access to Red Distribution, which was part of Sony. So you had good distribution. You had access to their infrastructure. So you had their retail team. You could get their radio team to work it and all of that. And it was really interesting to juxtapose the life of this indie record with the life of the Thorns on Columbia, which, was a pretty big push. And so I'm trying to answer your question. So at that point, a few years after that, I put out a record called Under the Waves. And I think that's where there was a really interesting kind of sweet spot for artists like me in that position, to where we were into the iTunes age. So I could put out my record and people could get it anywhere. But it was before streaming services.
Yeah.
So, and then we had, especially on, over the years, I've had really good luck with sync licensing. And that record in particular had just a ton. We had like 2 Grey's Anatomy placements, a bunch of films and TV shows. We had a huge national Toyota commercial. And so when something like the Toyota commercial would happen, we just sold a ton of downloads. And like we sold out of CDs. And I had like an independent CD distribution through a thing called Think Indie, which is a distribution arm of the Coalition of Independent Music Stores. So my record was available in all independent music stores. It wouldn't have been available in the big chain stores. But we sold out of CDs immediately and repressed. But you could make a decent living at that time because, you know, when our TV commercial showed on the AFC football championships and, you know, became like a top Google search, you know, for the song. And then,
Yeah, like, what's that song? You know?
yeah. And then people wanted it, man. They had to go to iTunes and spend 99 cents, of which I would get 70 cents.
Yeah.
You know, compared to now, somebody goes, oh, what's that song? And you get, you know, 3/10 of a penny.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was like, you know, when you talk about sort of the evolution of how it changed, that was really a sweet spot for independent musicians. And you had, you know, the internet was getting more sophisticated. So I had a really cool online store, had a great web designer, designed like a super cool website. So you could really, and there was a message board on there. You know, nobody sees what message boards on websites anymore.
Yeah.
So that was a really, I think, a fruitful time for artists in my position. And especially I was lucky because I had the benefit of major labels having spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building my quote unquote brand.
Yeah.
You know, but even artists who were just starting out had the ability to sort of work the internet and sync placements and stuff like that. Enter the streaming era, and I probably won't be the first person to lament the sort of financial arrangement there.
We actually have a saying. We're pretty much at this point just need to put on a T-shirt, but that we have a saying on this show called "It's give musicians your money." So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, we're always trying to push people towards the band camps and towards the physical merchandise and the physical recordings. You know, so yeah.
And you know, Spotify is great for discovery. In fact, we're doing an in-store. It'll be in the past by the time this airs in Seattle at Easy Street Records, which is a great, long-standing record store. And I was kind of checking out their social media feed, and they were interviewing some folks on the street. They do a thing like, what's in your bag? You know, what'd you buy today? And they were pulling it out. And it was interesting to see that the woman said, oh, you know, or the guy said, you know, oh, I heard this came up in my suggested on Spotify and I love it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really helpful in that way. And I love streaming services for the discovery and just being able to pull whatever obscure thing I want to listen to that I don't want to go spend, you know, in the late 80s, a CD was like $18.
Sure. And you didn't know what you were getting, you know?
I know.
So
there was
a bit
that.
of a roll of the dice. So,
So there's good and bad for sure.
Yeah.
But it certainly changed things. And as far as the music business, you know, kind of moving forward, I kind of stepped back from my quote unquote recording artist career when we got into the tens. I was, you know, working on producing other artists in the 2000s and started working as a film composer and did music for indie films and some TV commercials and stuff like that. So I was pretty busy with my head down here in the studio and didn't really play the game, you know, as things like Facebook entered the picture and as social media became more the play. You know, so I kind of missed out on that. And I kind of reflect back and as I'm now putting out a record and want to do everything I can to get it heard, I recognize that I kind of missed the boat in that way. In fact, when one of the first business meetings we had around the life cycle of this new album, someone said, you know, you're way more famous than your metrics would suggest, you know? And that's just because I didn't sort of play the game and work the Instagram and all of that stuff in the early days. I was pretty half-assed about it, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, we now see it's a totally different world. And I heard an interview with a music marketing guru who was like basically saying, you're not just a musician, you're a content creator that makes music.
Yeah.
And, you know, Elaine, my musical partner and wife, and I have a sort of a joke side project that we'll probably never act on. But if we did, we'd probably make $1 billion. It's called Jan and Joko. And it'd be like a Weird Al Yankovic kind of, you know, joke songs. And we came up with the idea of a song. It's sort of in the style of Kraftwerk.
Okay.
And it's like, I used to be a singer songwriter, but now I am a content creator.
Yeah.
So, and I'm learning that big time now. I'm doing everything I can to get the record out, and I'm here. Who knew being a self-managed artist running my own label would be so much work? It's like
Sure.
cranking out the content with a capital C.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and there are musicians that have found another way to do it. I think of Roger Klein as one who, you know, um, built a community online in the early days, the dial-up days, pre-social media and streaming and all that. And you mentioned message boards, that kind of a thing. And I think that fan base that he built has helped sustain him for a long time. But you talk to, yeah, newer artists, and it's so many decisions you don't think about. Like, I'm gonna make this Instagram post and I need to look casual, but it also matters what I wear, you know? So, I mean, like
Right,
all these
right.
little things you like that go into the business side of it, the
Yeah,
content creation side of it, as much
yeah.
as that phrase is, a little painful to say
It
sometimes.
is.
So,
For me, the intention behind what you're doing is really important. There's in Buddhist philosophy, like your intention, it means as much as your actual actions.
yeah,
And so that's kind of been my guiding light with all the social media type stuff is like, if I'm begrudgingly going, oh, I got to do this, and blah, I'm just not going to do it.
yeah,
And I was told by the marketing people like, oh, and I will do some of these shortly. So people may see these in my feed and I'll look like a hypocrite, but the two camera, like talking to camera videos are the ones that are most effective and move the needle.
yeah,
And I was, like, so talk about the meaning behind your song and this kind of thing. And I was like, I started to do it and I was just like, oh, it was just frustrating. It felt forced. And especially I think that didn't work because it's like, I don't want to like talk to a camera and explain what my song means. I want people just to hear the song. I want the song to speak for itself. I'm happy to elaborate on songs in interviews, in a context like this where it's like a conversation with a human being.
yeah,
But like just talking blankly to a camera, like this song is da da da. I was just like, I just punted. I was like, I can't do it.
yeah.
I think I'll be more comfortable. I've done it a bit in the past, and I'll be more comfortable when it's just more like the lay of the land, like, hey, the record's out, we're playing, whatever, like that. I'll be able to do. But I'm lucky that I really enjoy my Substack, and I've been creating a lot of content over there. And what I love about that is it's broadening and expanding on the songs.
Yeah.
So I have a thing called From the Sketchbook where I literally share work tapes of my songs in progress. So like the last one for You Call Me Kid, I think there were 5 different work tape sketches from the very first idea that I had for it all the way down to, fleshing out the chorus. And then I write about the process, and I've been sharing, Tales from the Road, and I had a whole, I think, 5-part series all about the recording of my debut album, Necktie Second, which is getting a deluxe double vinyl reissue this fall. So that
Nice.
stuff is really fun. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy it. And I love the connection that I have with people who actually give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like these are people who signed up for my Substack. They want to get my emails. It shows right up in their inbox without any algorithm blocking and making me boost the post.
Yeah.
And so that's really fruitful and I love it. So any
Yeah.
musicians listening, I highly suggest you take on Substack. It's great. Be forewarned, it is a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. It is. Any of this is a lot of work. And I think, um, one of the reasons, even though those can feel disingenuous, one of the reasons I think that people do gravitate toward those, straight to camera conversation, what it all comes down to, whether it's a Substack or that or all of it, is they're seeking out that genuine stuff, and even through a screen, it can be hard, but even through a screen, you know people can sense bullshit.
Yeah.
And, I dabble in filmmaking. I had a similar experience this past year where I essentially was trying to make a short film for the wrong reasons.
Mm,
And I ended up um, having put in a fair amount of work in the project and realizing that I didn't like any of it. And I was only making myself unhappy trying to push forward on it. And, you know, what was going to come out was not going to be something I was going to be happy to share because it wasn't genuine, it wasn't true. And I knew that, and people were probably also going to know that because the things that I've made that people gravitate toward are the ones that come from the heart, you know? And so I
Yeah.
stopped. I
Yep.
stopped. And again, I think people can sense that. The reason why social media can be a terrible thing, but I think the reason why people gravitate toward that with their artist is because people want something real. They do want a real connection, and
Yeah.
so Substack is a way of doing it. And yeah, sometimes we have to do those things that we don't want to do with the other things, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think the genuine thing is the main thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think it's great that you tuned into that and recognized that and let it go,
yeah,
rather than just sort of putting something out that you don't feel great about. And, like in music, I think about, if people sort of let go of their integrity in search of commercial success, it's like worst case scenario, it works
yeah,
and you have success with it. And now you're stuck playing
do
that song that you don't love for the rest of your
yeah,
life.
yep,
And everybody wants you to do that again,
yeah.
So yeah, careful there with that sort of path, so.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, it's the other thing that was timely about you guys reaching out. I had recently talked to David Lowery, who has his most recent release, not exactly in the same vein, but very much in the same vein of sort of this reflection on very personal reflection on his life, his origin story, to for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing, sort of this deep dive into family. And so you've got this new album coming out. It will be out available when this comes out. So tell me a little bit about yeah, I mean, what's going on, what you're putting out for us, and the stories behind it, you know?
Yeah, well, real quick, I listened to the episode with David Lowery. I checked it
Oh,
out
great.
and super
Yeah.
cool interview. I love him. I've been a fan forever.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah. I
And I was
mean,
so happy to see him with that project. I mean, the scope of it is huge. It's so autobiographical. Like his is like, man,
yeah.
it's like in focus, like this is it. And his Substack is really cool too. He's a great writer of prose. And he goes into really, really a lot of detail with sort of expanding the stories behind the song. So yeah, fantastic. Big fan of him. We got to open for Cracker
Nice.
years ago, and it was heartbreaking because they were like, "Oh man, this went so well. We wish we could take you on tour with us, but we already booked the opening act." So that would have been a dream. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
so my record is not as sort of clear cut like an autobiography. But what we've been saying is there is an autobiographical thread that runs through the album. The cornerstone songs of the album are songs that address different aspects of my experience as an adoptee. So the adoption stuff, for lack of a better word, kind of came up around the time I was 40. And eventually, not long after that, I decided, hey, I think I'd like to connect with my birth mother. And I was born in the state of Oregon where they have open adoption records. And I applied for the pre-adoption birth record. And 3 weeks later, it arrived. And I learned that my birth mother had died just months prior.
Hmm.
And so that was heartbreaking and devastating. And I learned about a term called ambiguous grief that I definitely experienced. And it was a couple years before I was ready to write about that experience. But when I did, the first song was the single we released in July called Song for Barbara Ann, that just really speaks to that experience of missing meeting her. And then later I wrote another song. Like what I've said, I played these two songs. They're very, very sad songs. And I've played them back to back at shows recently. And what I've said is like, this experience was so significant in my life that it warranted not one, but two songs.
Yeah.
So Song for Barbara Ann really it was the first to come along, and it was the first that we began recording. In fact, the basic track of the guitar and vocal and a scratch piano began back in 2013 when my wife Elaine Summers and I were working on a project called the Droge and Summers Blend, which was like our two-part harmony band side project. Ultimately, we decided to not include that song on that album because it just felt like such a personal song that this should be on a record with my name on the front. And so we saved it for the solo record. But that was really like, as we started to think about making a record, we needed songs that could live alongside that song. So the term keystone is really appropriate here. Like it's the keystone song that everything else relies on it. And the structure holds together because of this song. And so over the course of several years, I was writing the material that would become this album. I should also mention that chronic fatigue was a big part of the story. In 2015, my father died. And shortly after that, my system just crashed. And I won't go into the details of the medical situation, but I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And we'll hit my 10-year anniversary mark with that in September.
Okay.
I'm still dealing with it. It's way, way better than it was before. Like I'm able to work. But anyway, so I was really put my career on hold during that time, and just focused on songwriting.
Yeah, and that's, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so everyone listening out there is familiar, because I think that is it's not a diagnosis that everyone necessarily is familiar with, or maybe has the correct idea in mind when they think about it. But it is truly I've got some personal experience with it myself, and it is truly a devastating thing. Imagine, you're taking the time to get the rest and go to sleep and have sleep hygiene and all of those things, and yet you wake up every morning and you feel like you were up all night anyway. And that is not fully it, but that is essentially, imagine that you were doing all the right things sleep-wise, and yet you feel like you've just been up constantly, and the fallout of that going, in your life.
And add jet lag to the top of it.
Yes,
too.
yes,
It's like, it was, at its worst, it was, debilitating. It was like I had to put my career on hold. Like I just couldn't work.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was a big part of the path of leading to this record, is that I had the space just to like develop the material. Another one of the adoption theme songs is the lead track called You Called Me Kid, which is a song, speaking of my dad passing away. I wrote it for my dad after he passed away and dedicated to both my parents. And it's just a song of love and gratitude to my parents that raised me. Sadly, my mom died 3 days before the single was released in June, which was heartbreaking. I was able to sing it for her at her bedside in her final days, which was really amazing. So that's, a emotionally loaded song for me. And it's been really incredible to just see it doing its thing in the world. It's been amazing, the response that I've got from both Song for Barbara Ann and You Call Me Kid. It's been as fulfilling of an experience of releasing music as I've ever had in all my years.
Yeah.
And then, there's some other songs that kind of touch upon different aspects of the adoption experience. One is called Gypsy Rose, which tells the story of my birth mother it's like a story song from the time I was born. And that was kind of fascinating. It was interesting to write a song about someone I'd technically never met, but I was able to reconnect with my birth family and was welcomed with open arms into the family, and just have had an amazing journey there, and soaking up the stories of Barb, my birth mother's life. And so I kind of put that song together kind of based on what I'd learned from that and from reading her journals. And it was super cool. Recently, I sent the song to her ex-husband. So she married this guy just a couple of years after I was born, and they were together for a while in the 70s. And I sent her the song, and when I wrote it, I kind of thought, okay, well, I don't have to be exact. I can just write a song and, have this character. And if I really capture her essence, that's great. And if not, hey, it's just a song. I'm just going to do my best. And it was really rewarding for me to hear from him. He said he was really impressed with the fact that he said I, quote, tuned into her spirit and really captured her. And so that was really amazing.
Yeah.
So then the rest of the songs on the album, like I said, we wanted to pick songs that sort of could live alongside Song for Barbara Ann. And so we're not going to have a woo-woo party anthem on the record,
Yeah.
And so there's other songs that kind of drop the listener in different periods of my life. And so we get to experience my wild psychedelic teenage years with Sundown at Francis Nash. You get to hang out on the road in the 90s on the tour bus with Fading Fast. And The only song on the album that's not sung like from my perspective is the closing song. It's called Taking Leave of My Senses. And this is a song that I dedicate to the late, great, aforementioned Andy Wood from Malfunction and Mother Love Bone, who your listeners may know died of a heroin overdose shortly before the release of Mother Love Bone's debut album.
Yeah.
And so this is a song sung from the perspective of an addict who's been on the wagon in that moment that they just say, fuck it, and use again. And that was the situation with him, as it happens with so many with opioids and heroin in particular. You know, they use and then they get clean and then they use again, but they don't realize that their tolerance is different after being clean, and then they OD.
Yeah.
And
Unfortunately, that was a story that we often encountered in the music world, especially in that era. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember when it happened, there was kind of a jaded guy in the scene. He was like, ADRD, man. And I was like, what that? He said, another drug-related death.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I've had my issues with substance abuse. So it's, you know, I understand that moment as well. I've been there. But in that song, I'm definitely sort of, you know, it's a character that's loosely based on Andy, and imagining those last moments for him of like when he kind of said, okay, I'm fuck it. I'm going to use again.
Yeah.
So,
you know, I mean, there's a lot of not necessarily bad stuff there, but, you know, definitely heavy stuff. I was just having this conversation with a local musician, Dina Woods, yesterday about, because she has this release that's digging into some grief and trauma and whatnot. We were talking about kind of how that feels to perform those songs live kind of over and over again. And so for you, when you're playing these songs, does that take you to, does it kind of touch on some uncomfortable feelings? Does it take you to a healing place? Is it just playing the song? I mean, what is that for you when you have to dig into those places in front of a live audience so many times?
Of those options, I would say healing place. Maybe I sort of put up sort of a level of protection when I'm performing them, that I'm not going to, like, you know, in the case of like Lonely Mama or Song for Barbara Ann, it's like, you know, when we were writing Song for Barbara Ann, there's a lyric at the end of the chorus that just says, I just wasn't part of your plan. You know, and a big part of the emotional upheaval that came around when I really started to unpack and unearth everything related to my adoption experience was, you know, I remember journaling, you know, she didn't want me, you know, and that brought up just heavy tears. And so those sort of feelings of abandonment were really, really heavy early on. I've done years now of therapy, including EMDR, which is an amazing form of trauma therapy, and, you know, recognize that, you know, adoption and, you know, what they call birth trauma or adoption trauma was not the only trauma that I had to reconcile and to work with. So there was a lot of work to where I think a couple things are at play to answer your question. I think one, I'm in a place now where I don't feel wounded, or I don't feel like there's suffering involved in this relationship of the separation from my birth mother and the pain of not getting to connect with her. I'm at peace with it.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a little bit of like, I'm on stage, I can't just start crying now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is not the time. You know, I've sung through tears before. It's not easy, and it doesn't sound pretty.
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit of that sort of bracing, you know, like, okay, this is not the time to do that. But I definitely, you know, feel very connected when I'm performing those songs, and I'm very aware of, it sounds a bit pretentious to say it, but I'm aware of the power that these songs have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, and it's like the response that we've gotten when we've played them live, you know, people are crying, man. It's like people are shedding tears and they're really feeling it, you know. And so I'm aware of that as it's happening. And something just in general of performing live lately, I'm just so much more present than I used to be and open to the moment. And I don't know if it's possible to be ego free, but I'm definitely less ego than I used to have when I was younger. When I was younger, I wanted things to be perfect. If the monitor sounded like crap, I was lamenting that inside my head. I was imagining the person in the back of the room that was saying, he didn't deserve his deal. He's not that good or whatever. I
Yeah.
was just way more concerned with perception and all of that kind of ego-based stuff. And as I've grown up and done a lot of meditation and a lot of therapy and read some good self-help books like A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm in a place where I can be there and just be so thankful and appreciative of being able to share the music and, having warm bodies, leave the house, find a place to park, buy a ticket, come in and sit down and be quiet for 90 minutes and listen to what we have to share.
Yeah.
And so just so grateful and appreciative. So there's a lot of that energy in there too. So yeah, really excited to get back. We're going to the East Coast in September and we've got some Northwest states in October. And I'm just thrilled to be back to playing live because I didn't play much at all for many, many years.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about art and what you're doing is, you're as much as you are after the work and experience and and you mentioned therapy and just as two men standing here sitting here talking to the guys out there, therapy is so important and so helpful and please seek out therapy.
yeah, yeah. And if there's trauma in your past,
Yeah.
look into EMDR.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
Google it. It's very legit. This isn't some woo-woo, crazy off the beaten path stuff. It's very, very well studied.
Yeah.
And I've never met anybody who's done it who hasn't said, in fact, as recent as last night, hasn't said some version of it changed my life for the better. So that's, I'm not a professional. This is not, it's not healthcare advice, but yeah, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on the internet, but it's incredible. And if there's one thing with this record, telling my story and sharing that stuff, if somebody discovers that therapy and has a similar result as me, that's a win.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of art. People hear these stories, they can relate to them, connect to them, and find their own path to healing, hopefully. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, I've heard the full record, and it's really, really something. I very much enjoyed it, and so everyone out there, please check it out. There are links in the show notes. I forget, is there a physical release or is it just
Yeah.
gonna be on digital? Okay, so yep,
Yeah.
so yeah, you can grab yourself a physical copy, and Pete might be coming to your town to.
Yeah, there's a limited number. We've got a Bandcamp, which is puzzletreerecords.bandcamp.com.
Nice. Okay. I'll make
And
sure
the
that's in
vinyl,
there.
there's a special variant of the vinyl. Some of your listeners may be old enough to remember, or may be collectors enough to know about white label promos.
Yeah.
So, in the old days when they would send the records to radio stations for promotional use, they would be with a white label to differentiate them from the regular release.
Yeah.
And those were always, very sought after by collectors because they were oftentimes the very first to come off the press.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and they're just cool because there's a limited number. So we did, the pressing plant we used is in Colorado. It's called Paramount Pressing. It's owned by David Rawlings from Gillian Welch fame.
Yeah.
And they are like exacting qualities. Like quality is like top notch there. And they make available what's called D2 ultra premium vinyl. And so we have a limited number. In fact, I think there's only just a handful left now on the Bandcamp store with the white label on the premium vinyl. So I'm pretty excited about it. As a vinyl dork, when I heard about that, I was like, oh, white label promo, that'd be super cool. So
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that concept because even with CDs, when you come across those promo CDs, there's something kind of cool about that when you'd find one of those in a used store.
Totally, yeah.
So yeah. Well, again, everyone, the link to the Bandcamp's in there, so check that out and check out those tour dates. And hopefully, Pete, you get to my neck of the woods one of these days if you're ever in South Bend again or over to Three Oaks, Michigan. Or
Three Oaks.
yeah. Acorn
Oh,
Theater.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, when I listened to the David Lowry.
Oh yeah, that's because they were.
conversation.
Yeah,
You mentioned it, and I was like, I checked it out. I Googled it, and that looks like a cool spot.
it's a really cool spot.
Yeah.
The Acorn Theater is one of my favorite local venues. They do a really amazing job of helping bring in just some amazing shows to the area.
Yeah.
So definitely a great room. Yeah, it'd be cool to have you there. And
What's the acoustic listening room in South Bend? Like intimate. We're into like super intimate. We're starting small. So
Yeah, I'll have to send you guys some options because there are some a couple of cool places down
Cool.
that way.
Great.
But yeah, it's a fun time over here. There's a lot of cool things happening, a lot of great music to check out, and
Sweet.
yeah. So yeah, hopefully we can get you through here sometime. But everyone out there listening, wherever you are, check out the tour dates and grab yourself a copy of the new album when it comes out. Which actually it will be out when you
It's
hear
out.
this.
It
So,
might be. Maybe it's gone gold already. Who knows?
yeah, who knows? Who knows? If not, get out
Anything is
there.
possible.
Yep. Well, Pete, it's awesome to chat with you. Thank you for taking the time to do this, and keep us posted on what you're doing. And we'll chat again in the future.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Definitely, yeah. All right, take care.
Bye.
You have been listening to Anywhere the Needle Drops from Red Chuck Productions. Keep up on new episodes of this show, our live events, and various creations and other happenings over at redchuckproductions.com or by following us on social media at Red Chuck Productions. Special thanks to Hero Jr. for our theme music. You can check them out over at herojuniormusic.com. That is Hero, Hero, Junior, JR, music.com. A big shout out to Paul Clemson and Theory One Productions for handling sound duties and so much more. Check out their magic over at theory1productions.com. And a big thank you to Earthworks Audio for outfitting the Red Chuck studio. See their microphones and their other products over at earthworksaudio.com. Be sure to support all of our guests by visiting their websites, social media, clicking that subscribe button, seeing them live, and checking out their merch stores. Give musicians and artists your money. We'll be back with the next episode. Until then, thank you for your time. Here's to life.